What do you believe right now that's making you feel this way? And when you analyse it, you realise how irrational you can be at times.
Every single one of our major customers and minor customers all shut their doors overnight.
It's not sales per se, but the outcome of it is because people get to know you, they get to see you.
But, what's the culture like at the business? What do we stand for, the values?
I've got to tick that box on my personal development program I don't really want to be here.
Scaling up a business isn't easy. If it were, we wouldn't have less than 4% of businesses scaling beyond 10 employees or around £1 million turnover level, and less than 1% beyond 50 employees. But the contribution that we make as owner-managers to our economies is immense and should never be underestimated. Yet it can be a tough gig for all of us at times, and only other business owners truly understand the challenges that we face. And through ScaleUp Radio, we aim to help make things a little easier. We interview guests who have been where you are now and may have faced some of the challenges that you are facing. And they offer their thoughts and advice on what has worked for them, as well as what didn't. And we've also combined many of the lessons from these interviews and also through working with hundreds of owner managers over the last 10 years or so into a practical scale-up handbook that we've called the Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System, or ESUS. And it's for owner managers like you and me as we navigate our own scale-up journey. And you can order a copy through your favourite online book retailer or by going to all the W's, esusgroup.co.uk, www.esusgroup.co.uk. Another fascinating episode of ScaleUp Radio. Today I talked with Sara Roberts, who is the founder of Healthy Nibbles. And it pretty much says what it does on the tin, but it's all about really good health and wellness advice and essentially aiming to drive health and well-being throughout the nation, really, eventually. Right now, Sara has built the business up to about £1 million run rate. They've got 10 people. They're on track to getting to £50 million turnover within the next 5 years. That's the aim. They're just going through a Series A investment round now, having had business angel investment in the past. And indeed, we uncover one or two really good lessons around that investment side of things with business angels. We also talk a bit about the team side, some of the ups and downs along the way, some of the dark points, and some really good advice, really coherent and cohesive advice from Sara, from somebody that really is going through this journey. And I highly recommend that you listen to Sara's story. There's also really good backstory in terms of what got Sara to start the business in the first place. So she's got a great story, clearly executed really well, got great strategy moving forwards, and you can't fail to take some value out of listening to Sara's lessons. Welcome to another episode of ScaleUp Radio. Today I'm here with Sara Roberts, who is the founder of Healthy Nibbles. So Sara, welcome to ScaleUp Radio.
Thank you. I'm really delighted to be here and looking forward to having a conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear all about Healthy Nibbles. So there's a clue in the name. What's it all about?
Yeah, so it is what it says on the tin, so to speak, I guess. When we first started, we were very much a simple sort of concept of putting health food into vending machines. Really spotted that opportunity because there wasn't anything essentially in the market that was doing that. Fast track to where we are now, we're a slightly extended version, shall we say. I was going to say slightly different, but it's not. So we're essentially comprised of 3 active areas where we look at unattended retail. So that can be anything from a vending machine to an unmanned cafe.
Okay.
Corporate gifting, but very much on a bespoke level. So we look at the story that somebody's trying to create essentially from our client's perspective and create something that fits their needs in a sustainable and health way. And then we also have something called food service concierge. It's a very grand name for essentially an elevated wholesale experience. So we're just about guiding our clients when they're buying wholesale, they're buying healthy food. They may not always know the brand names that they're dealing with. So we kind of guide them on that journey in terms of what would be suitable for whoever they're essentially providing the snacks to.
Great. And do you sell direct to consumer?
Not a great deal. There is the functionality on our website, but really our core sort of business, our core clients are businesses. Really, we're looking at the consumer. It is the consumer, but within the workplace environment, essentially.
Yeah. And can you give us a feel for the size of the business or the stage that you've got to?
Yeah, so we've hit the sort of elusive 1 million run rate,
Great,
which is always a good sign.
Yeah.
We have been going just over sort of 7 years. There's sort of 10 of us in the team. We're just concluding our Series A funding round. So we've got to that stage essentially, which is going to see a tremendous level of growth.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel we've grown up a little bit, I guess, coming out of that startup stage, and we've put our sort of teenage clothes on, and we're on that sort of fast, high growth stage, I guess, where we've learned an awful lot. It hasn't been a fail quick, fail cheap, and all those cliches.
Right. Yeah.
It's been a solid 7 years of learning. Yeah. And to get to where we are, where I think now we've got really, really good, strong foundations. I've just last year completed the Goldman Sachs
10,000
KSB. So really feel that we've got robust foundations. We're focused on sustainability. So we're a B Corp and Queen's Award for Sustainable Development recipient.
Yeah.
And we've got very clear lines of growth for the next sort of 5 to 7 years, as much as you can say what's going to happen in the market, given all the challenges that all of us have been through over the last few years.
Yeah, and what's the primary reason for raising doing the Series A funding? What's the money going to be primarily used for?
It's kind of a split. We need to amp up our team quite considerably. We have done some work so far with Transport for London in terms of getting healthy vending onto public transport platforms.
Okay.
And that is set to accelerate over the next 12 months. And to date, our marketing spend has been laughable for the most part. So really, we want to invest in essentially going out to market with a lot more boldness, I guess I would say, and just having more of a structured marketing activity that is essentially reflective of the stage of the business, that you kind of bootstrap your way through in an early stage, and then we're hopefully on that stage that we can actually fulfill the high growth essentially. So I feel that when you go out and do aggressive marketing campaigns or awareness campaigns, you can actually then you've got the team to sort of follow through on that.
Excellent. So you essentially feel that you've got to the point where you've learned a lot of lessons. You've worked out really what your product market fit is properly, what the channels for growth are, and you're really just raring to scale up now. Hence the
absolutely.
Yeah. Excellent. Really good. And I mean, how does the money work? How do you make money at the end of the day? You've got the 3 primary channels that you talked about. How does the cash work?
So we've got different models depending on the different revenue streams essentially. So very much around our automated retail, we're looking at typically monthly subscription rates that cover not only the actual product itself, so whether it's a vending machine or an unattended cafe, but also supports well-being, because crucially, the tools that we are, or both the snacks and the solutions are tools to drive health and well-being.
Yeah.
So each of our clients, when they work with us, they also get health and well-being support essentially pinned onto the back of all of the services that they get. And that's our ultimate mission, is we want to stop people being negatively affected by ultra high processed foods. So it's very much driven by that. So we have a sort of subscription and servicing model within that side. We have on the snack boxes, it's very much paid for with a sort of paid up front with a standard sort of margin in there, and very similar on the whole food wholesale services side.
Yeah. And roughly, what's the sort of percentage split then of between those three areas?
We're in a really fortunate position that it's actually fairly equal across the three.
Yeah.
But we've worked hard at doing that, so that I think there's always a risk, and this is sort of very much built on an experience in one of my previous companies, which was service driven and in the brand and innovation side, where we did experience a point where one client was very heavily weighted on the revenue that was coming in.
Yeah.
And it makes you rather nervous. And it's something that from that sort of nervousness years ago, I brought into this experience. And so we've worked really hard to try and balance it across the three services, but then equally not have any single client that is heavily weighted as well, just to sort of essentially future-proof and protect the business.
Yeah, I guess particularly with the unattended retail, that's presumably lots of different sites paying you relatively small amounts of money, but as you say, you're spreading that risk over a large number of sites.
Exactly. So they tend to be with us for 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
I guess an experience coming out of COVID was that the minute the lockdown happened, our revenue on that channel literally dropped off to zero.
Right.
Overnight.
Yeah.
Our box revenue did the polar opposite. So it kind of made up for that.
Brilliant.
And then the food service concierge actually came out of the back of a COVID recovery, essentially, where companies didn't necessarily want to sign up for a long-term contract with the unattended retail, but they didn't want just boxes. They wanted to provide snacks and solutions within the workplace, but they just wanted that flexibility. So that actually grew quite considerably, so 1,000% in 2 years, just literally down to more of a demand for flexibility. This year is the first year post-COVID that we're starting to see some of those behavior patterns that we actually experienced pre-COVID, as in certain periods of the year being more busy with inbound leads and things like that, and that sort of well-being exploration that companies do. They tend to always fit within two specific quarters, and we're seeing that reflected again this year, which is quite interesting.
Great. So I think that's a really good insight, because we hear a lot about not being over reliant on any one customer or small number of customers. We quite often, or certainly before the pre-pandemic, I think many of us might not have thought about being over reliant on a particular sector. And so you if you just had your unattended retail, even though you had lots of individual customers and weren't reliant on any particular one, the whole sector essentially went down, or that whole channel went down. Whereas by having the others, that gave you that resilience and stability, didn't it?
Absolutely. And again, I think that was a real lesson that came from me in the early days. We had some angel investors saying that we were trying to spread ourselves too thin by introducing boxes. And I really felt that we weren't. And thankfully, in going with my gut, essentially, and maintaining both of these, because there was no data to back up either way, really. So it was very much a gut instinct and a sort of founder instinct in that respect. We actually protected their money and protected the business, because had we culled the boxes, we would not be here at all. Yeah, because it was instant. And if you look at some of the bigger players within food service and how they have struggled post-COVID, we didn't have that cushioning and that padding around us as a scale up to be able to do that. So it's something that I'm really pleased we did and has got us to where we are.
Excellent. Good. So in terms of who else is out there, what's the competitive landscape like?
Not want to say that there isn't a great deal, but there actually isn't a great deal, really, in terms of how we've structured the business. There are vending companies out there. You can nip down to your local Whole Foods if that's what you wanted to do. But in terms of coming into an organization and trying to change behavior patterns to drive health and well-being and do that sustainably, I think there are very few competitors out there. We're kind of innovative in that space, in as much as we bring the solution, but we equally bring the education. But then we take it a step further. The products are sustainable, but we also externally vet the healthiness of our products.
Okay.
So it's not the Healthy Nibbles way. It kind of is, but it's not us setting those benchmarks. It's external parties that set the benchmarks.
What, I'm not sure I fully follow that. So what did you mean by that?
So we work in close sort of relationships with a company called the International Well Building Institute.
Okay.
And that is a building certification. And within that certification process, there is an element geared around nourishment. And they use academic data, data from World Health Organization, from leading studies to actually create a framework of nutritional components for products.
Okay.
So we need it to be under this amount of saturated fats or added sugars or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And what we do is when we're bringing on a new brand, we benchmark against that and say, right, would it pass essentially the global level of being a healthy product? Because in the industry, there is far too many brands in the market that masquerade as a healthy product, but really aren't. They're still ultra high processed foods. And that is essentially underlying the problem of Alzheimer's, cancers, and so many different lifestyle related diseases. So we wanted to make sure that not only do we protect ourselves, but we also protect our customers and their employees, to say that we're not health washing, we're not greenwashing or wellness washing or whatever comes out next. We're actually fundamentally going to every piece of information that we put out, every brand we put out, we've got a trail of evidence behind that brand to say that this is healthy and this is why, and this is impactful and this is why.
Excellent.
So puts us in a fairly unique position in that sense. But obviously, if you're doing your sort of standard competitor analysis, there are lots of places that people can bring snacks in, they can bring food in. We're just making it really easy for people.
And would you count somebody like Graze as being a competitor, or is that just not really in your space?
It kind of is on the boxes. Apart from Graze, typically have first of all, it's their own branded products, and if you're getting a Graze box, it's individually sort of packaged items that are sort of geared, or at least seem to be from the outside, geared towards that sort of calorie element. What we're trying to do is take people on a cleaner journey, but also more of a personalized nutrition journey, because what we've identified is what you need may be completely different to what I need, completely different to somebody who's maybe going to do an Ironman or somebody who's trying to lose 5 stone. All of those elements make up a very different requirement for the food that they're eating. And that's what we're trying to support. And then you get on to even further. So people following vegan diets or 14 allergen safe, we're providing solutions around the entire food on the go ecosystem, essentially.
Which is starting to sound like that's quite a complicated thing to achieve, is it? Or
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. It's not as easy. It's really interesting, actually, when we, even recently, where we've onboarded people in the team, and the perception of what we initially are compared to the complexity of what goes on, essentially, shall we say, under the hood, is very, very different. And the rigidity that we actually go through in terms of vetting our suppliers and working with our partners, just because ultimately it leads back to this goal of we want to enable healthier choices, and we want to do so without negatively impacting the planet. And that's ultimately what we're about. So in order to do that, every single person out there knows there's so much fake media and fake claims around everything that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, that actually the health industry is totally confused for the most part. And so is the sustainability and impact. that it's only through these benchmarking that you're actually able to sort of cut through all of the noise and say, this is what we know. And these are the choices that we're offering you based on the information that we know at the moment. As it changes, then we're able to adapt our product range. But yeah, it is very complex. We've got a fabulous buyer who works through all of those different elements and has great relationships with all of our suppliers. And that's essentially what makes it possible. And the fact that a lot of the challenger brands are really willing to have this dialogue and have this conversation and get their products out.
Excellent. So what's the story? What got you started? You mentioned you run a couple of businesses before as well. So what got you to the point where you started Healthy Nibbles?
So it was really a personal experience. My dad was in hospital in the last few days of his life with a lifestyle related cancer. Mm-hmm. I went to a vending machine at 3:00 in the morning, and there was the usual unhealthy items in the machine, but also there was a poster next to it saying diabetes and obesity kill. And it was just that huge juxtaposition between, this is what we're telling you should eat, but actually this is what we're providing you.
Yeah.
And then I remember walking back through the palliative care unit and seeing the nurses, and they were essentially being fueled by processed bread, jam and butter, and a lot of chocolates that all the well-wishing family had given them.
Yeah.
And it just struck me that not only are they not providing health in an environment that they're trying to cut down healthcare costs, but they're trying to encourage health and well-being, and they're trying to tackle diabetes and obesity. But then equally, these people that are absolutely tremendous in these wards and hospitals are working their socks off, and we're not actually supporting them in their health journey either. And actually, there are studies in there in terms of the level of obesity within the NHS staff is actually very, very high.
Right.
I'm quite certain that that is fueled by this sort of lack of availability, and then obviously a wider availability of all the unhealthy items that are there.
Yeah, yeah. So where did you go from there then? So, I mean, sounds like your father died. So
he did, yes.
Yeah, so
the legacy is left.
Yeah. So where did you take it? Where did you take it from there?
So it took a while, but then when I revisited the idea, I realized that there really wasn't anybody in the market that was doing this. At the time, I had no understanding why. I had come from brand strategy and innovation, so not an environment that was really related in that sense. So having identified the fact that there was nobody really playing in this market, I thought, there's definitely a solution that needs to be had. Coming from the branding environment, you're constantly in other people's workplaces and fueled by, bacon butties in the morning and pastries for networking and coffee. Yeah. So I thought, there's definitely, again, a need within that workplace to actually drive performance for businesses, to drive well-being, to drive retention. So I ended up tootling off to the local bank and trying to take out a loan to buy vending machine stock and see what happened. So yeah, and the rest is I was going to say the rest is history, but that makes it far too simplified for the journey that we've been on. But yes.
So you managed to get some money out of a bank by going in there saying, I want to buy some healthy nibble stock.
That was a good few years ago. I wouldn't try it now.
Well done.
Yeah, quite an achievement. Wasn't a great deal, I promise. But yes, we were very, very fortunate that our first client is the BBC in Glasgow, and that was a really good opportunity to go into an environment that had, and was still there, a few hundred staff that were 24/7 around the clock, essentially, and see would healthy food actually sell out of a vending machine. It was an incredibly archaic machine, knocking on for 480 kilos of solid metal, pretty much. Didn't have any tech on it apart from the cashless. And compared to where we are now is completely different. But it did ultimately prove that people will buy healthy food, that they needed education and support. So they needed to know that the money that they were spending was on an item that tasted good, that was still good for them, because taste is ultimately a priority once we've gone through all the credential stuff. And yeah, that's where it's led us. So it was really, really good to sort of, it was more complicated than I expected it to be in terms of just being able to go out and lease machines, because the industry was quite closed to that. There wasn't a great deal of support from the actual governing body, the sort of associations around this industry, around health food, nor really around the tech developments and things like that. But times have changed, and we've got a great vending manufacturer, machine manufacturer, and a great set of suppliers in this space that mean that we've got some brilliant tech tools now. So you can search via your dietary preference, you can do multi-buy. So if you want to buy 3 or 4 items, you can just do it in a single transaction. We've got wheelchair users settings, so it reduces the eye level,
Right.
and raises the delivery bin on extraction, and then all the well-being support that goes alongside that around it. So it's a really sort of comprehensive service and works really, really well, makes an impact.
So take us through some of the key milestones and sort of maybe the inflection points, if you like, within your journey from when you started at the BBC in Glasgow.
Yeah, I think there are a few that really stand out. I think the first major one after the sort of installation, obviously the installation, and then it proves that it works. So we're sort of like, great, we've actually got something that is worth testing and taking further. Fast track to sort of a couple of years from then, where we looked at the boxes and would that be well received. Our first client in that space was 3 Mobile, and we serviced every single retail store in the country with quarterly snack boxes, really fueling their sort of Wellness Wednesday campaign. And that was a real aha moment, that companies were interested and they were going to put money behind wellness, and they were going to do it in a really strategic way. It wasn't for 3, it was absolutely not about what I call the fruit bowl token gesture, where somebody sticks a fruit bowl and says, yeah, we've done well-being. It wasn't about that. It was underpinned every single quarter with a really robust message around different aspects of health, well-being, and diversity. And that went on for years until COVID actually impacted that. I think the next big milestone was in around 2019, where we were approached by Transport for London.
Okay.
And we had initially reached out to them to support their back office. And they sort of countered that with, why don't we come onto the platform? And obviously we're B2B, and this was the big B2C. What do we do this? This is sort of stepping outside of what we want. But obviously where we were at that point was most of our clients were in London and within that sort of M25 sort of ring road. So for us, this is a brilliant opportunity to get in front of all of our clients walking through these transport hubs, but actually it's fueling the goal that we want to do. It's making healthy choices and healthy eating most accessible. So our 4 machines at the moment have a footfall of about 240 million a year.
Wow.
So that is super exciting, and we see consistent use, and we get so much exciting data from the machines just to show how much the service is valued, and the repeat purchase patterns and things like that. That it was just really, really exciting to see that the vision that we have for the business is actually being utilized by consumers, because that's ultimately, when you've got a vision, it isn't anything without the customers. So it doesn't matter how good the vision is if nobody's buying from you. So that was really good. I think obviously challenging through COVID, which again, there were lots of different lessons out of that. And then I think the next big one for me was being invited to COP26 as essentially the future of healthy food and retail on the go. So we're invited to take part in Goals House which was really, really important for us and a really good, solid milestone. And great to see a vending machine in that setting, great to see it being used by some amazing people, but actually more importantly, to be at the center of those, the dialogue around sustainable food systems, which was really important. And since then, we have worked with the company with Goals House we were present at Davos earlier this year. Okay. We're going to be at Cannes in June and COP28 it will be later this year. So again, it's really exciting to see us being embedded in that sustainable food system dialogue, which is ultimately what I want to do. And then I guess for me, the next big milestone is closing the funding round, because obviously that facilitates the growth and to realize some of those visions that we have as a business.
Yeah, and that's live at the minute, that funding round, is it?
Yeah, we're just signing everything off at the moment, so that's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about the people? How many people are there now in the business?
We've got 10, and we expect to be somewhere around sort of 25 to 30 in the very sort of, I was going to say short time, but as time allows and as the right people join, that is a huge lesson I've learned over the years, is to be very much based around recruiting people that are values based, because when they align to what we're doing, they embrace the vision, they become ambassadors themselves rather than me just as a founder being the ambassador. They become sort of ambassadors to the vision of the business. So yes, as long as it takes to get the right people.
So that's quite so if you're growing from 10 to 25 to 30, how are you going to so focus on the value side of things? How are you going to manage keeping that culture then and making sure people are focusing on the right things, do you think, as you scale?
I think there's been a few things that have been through this process. I think one is taking unnecessary work from me, and being able to, if somebody else can do it within the team and is capable of doing that work within the team, let them do it, because then that frees some of my time to then be able to invest in the people and spend time with them, nurturing that vision and embrace and sort of distilling everything that I've learned over the years into these individuals.
Yeah.
I think that is really, really crucial. And then I think allowing them to make decisions and them to grow and scale and giving them that autonomy within the business, I think that really helps the team take ownership over their respective areas and drive that. But then because they're embedded in the vision as well, and because they know what we're trying to achieve, they continue to drive that. So I think some of it starts with me in terms of relinquishing control, but relinquishing those tasks that can be done by others that then enables that time. I think right back from interview and the recruitment process, we spend so much time now just getting to know them, getting to know people that want to work for us, getting third parties to join that conversation sometimes as well, to look out for different aspects on the conversations. That said, I had a recommendation recently of the person that's joined the team in growth marketing, and that just worked because the recommendation came from a trusted source, and then the conversations flowed really, really well. And there was an alignment there, and it's working really, really well. So I think there's an element of some of it not being too formulaic about how you approach things, but equally so just being willing to invest in that time. I think too often founders get so focused on the high growth that they don't come back home and invest in their people and spend that time with people. And I think that that's really key in nurturing, and the transparency and support and essentially coaching. You almost become a coach with a sort of, then outward vision is the other side of it, but your role kind of seems to, or at the moment, that's how I'm seeing my role, splitting into two, where there's an element of this sort of coaching and nurturing. And that's a huge learning lesson for me, because I'm not natural in that sense, I would say. And then the vision piece and the partnership piece and the innovation piece, which I really, really love doing, which I would naturally sort of scoot off and do till my heart's content. But then just knowing the value of spending that time with the team, I think is crucial. And hopefully it's going to be one where I'll have to revisit that answer later, years down the line, and say, did I nail it or didn't I? Because I don't know. I think I've had bad experiences of bringing people that weren't a good fit for the business. And I don't want to repeat that. So I've got some, shall we say, alarm bells that go off if there's a connection to the previous mistakes or experiences, what I would say. And then I know what works well. So I think you just have to, some of it is trial and error, I think.
Are you able to think of an example or share something around those alarm bells that might help others?
Yeah, I think the first thing was coming through this Goldman Sachs program was just the importance of being a values-led recruitment process. So what are you trying to create? And that process actually created one of our new values, which is essentially to build a team that reflects humanity. Okay. So humanity as a being, shall we say, is very, very diverse. It's very different. We have to work really, really hard at creating an environment that is open to dialogue, open to disagreement, without somebody taking the hump and, spitting their dummy out. Yeah. But is equally able to have challenging conversations. So you might have, I don't know, an atheist and a Christian in a room or whatever it may be. You might have somebody that's pro this, against it. You've got to be able to have those open dialogues. Yeah. And share experiences, because actually all of our customers are very diverse anyway, and put that into a melting pot. And I think that really, there was a sort of aha moment in that learning that's what I want to create for the team. I want to create a safe place where we can agree, disagree, but in safety and in transparency. So that became a sort of real guiding point, as well as the health and sustainability side. I think that experience then fueled the way that I interview. So I really do look at what's an individual's goals? What do they want to get out of this experience? I think in terms of the red flags, I can't put my finger on it 100%, but what I do know is there was one individual in particular. We'd spent 4 or 5 hours at least interviewing the person over several meetings. Seemed really, really great. But the person had come from a big, big corporate background into a smaller company. I was enamored by the level of qualifications and skills that they brought, that I thought, do you know what? This person could be the most amazing commercial director. Yeah. And got them into the business. And really, there was a massive disconnect between a large corporate experience and being able to adapt to a agile, high growth experience. Right. Or environment, should I say. And, suddenly realizing that we don't have an IT department or a HR department or anything of that nature, and it's kind of like you've just got to get on with it, deal with it yourself. It's Dr. Google almost. Yeah. But I think that sort of their expectations on some things obviously worked really well. We move a lot quicker, but there were other things where you don't have that level of budget, or you've got to think in a different way to reach your target audience, and it didn't work. Now that comes down to, I think, very much the individual, rather than a blanket approach that you don't hire somebody from a large corporate, because there can be people that have come from that experience that are desperate to get out of that and want to do that. But it's actually helping people understand that on the journey as well. So, have you thought about what it's going to be like working for an agile startup as opposed to working for a large corporate? And even just people that just sort of, they just want to get the job done and get out. Startup world or scale-up world doesn't really allow. It does allow a great deal of flexibility. You might quite easily be able to have an afternoon off if that just happens to be very spontaneous, but a gap comes. You might be able to say to the team, do you know what, let's have an hour, finish an hour early. But equally so, you might have that pitch or that activity or that project that is going to drive and demand more from the team. And you have to have people that are flexible to adapt to that.
Good, excellent advice. And you were making me think actually along there as well about I heard somebody the other day saying, in a fast-growing, scaling entrepreneurial type company, you want to be hiring talent and passion, and that would go along with your values, but rent in the experience. So if you need that heavyweight experience, then rent that in rather than actually buy it in. And recruit, which might go a little bit with your what you were saying about from the big corporate and getting a little bit starry-eyed with their experience.
I think that makes I would certainly second that, definitely. And if you're renting it in and you see it working, then you can bring it in further, but a lot more permanently. But I think that would be a definite recommendation.
Good. So what about the cash along the way? I mean, you're obviously raising some money at the minute. What about before to get to this point? Have you had to raise money along the way?
We've done some angel investment, a couple of different transactions. Not necessarily the way I would repeat them again.
You would or you wouldn't?
I would definitely do angel investment again. I wouldn't necessarily do it in the way that I did. I think I sold our equity too cheaply in some respects.
Okay.
And I've learned so much along the way. So, allocating what does that investor do? What is that investor bringing to the table? Rather than just a sort of blanket passive investor that sort of doesn't really get involved.
Right.
And I think I would try and structure that a little bit better if I was going to, shall we say, revisit the sort of very early stages. But we also got sort of startup loans that sort of, the sort of, I'm trying to think.
Yeah, some of the grant things.
Yeah, the early stage startup loans and grants, which were really, really supportive in this journey. And R&D tax credits as well, which really support if you are in an innovative space.
Yeah. Good.
I mean, I believe it's getting sort of harder if you're not in that sort of innovative space, because I think that it has been exploited over time. But I think if you are doing something as an innovative business and you can verify that, I think it's a definite revenue stream that can be overlooked.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's less expensive than giving away equity or paying interest.
Well, indeed. And I just wanted to explore that, what you said there about maybe gave your equity away too cheap. So what would you do differently with a bit of hindsight now? I
think so. Just to sort of put this in perspective, this was my very first ever having to raise for this business. So previously I've been involved very much in consultative agency style environments, and you don't tend to have to raise in quite the same way. I would have probably got to know more people before I made those decisions.
Right.
And I would have gone out for cash much earlier than I needed it.
Okay.
And I would also done far more due diligence on the investors. And I think that is massively overlooked again, is something that I don't feel. And I remember sitting there previously when people probably gave me that advice years ago, saying, don't rush into the decision. It's like, it's all fair and well you saying that, but if I run out of cash in the next 2 months, I'm not going to have a business, am I, sort of thing. Yeah. You've not been here. And they probably have, and probably been in exactly the same situation as I'm saying. And I would say, if you're going out for cash, go out earlier than you need.
Yeah.
Even more so, that has been amplified over the last 12 months that we've been through in terms of our funding journey to get to where we are with the right investors.
Right.
And I think, just preparation, go in there prepared as well. I see so many founders not going into the situation prepared. So we had a deal room all set up. So before we'd even started the conversation, so you could say to me, right, what are your annual accounts 3 years ago? And it would be pinged across in 2 seconds, it's there. Or the access is granted. Tracking how many people are engaging. So when I use DocSend, So if I'm sending any information to prospective investors, you can actually track their engagement and how long they're spending on pages and things, and get to know their sort of interest levels, because we've got pages on sustainability, health, different elements and dynamics to the market, because it is quite complicated. But you can see where their level of interest is. So you're sort of starting with that insight straight away. But I think networking hugely, making sure you interview them as much as they interview you, and making sure you do the due diligence on them, and not being put essentially into a situation where your back's against the wall. So certainly for our first round of investors, our back was against the wall. Absolutely. And I wouldn't necessarily have made that decision, but you do. And then the other thing is, don't take yourself too seriously, because if you get to the other side and you've done that and look back in hindsight, it's just another lesson learned. And you know that, and you can, for the vast majority of things in life, you can move forward from any mistake that you've made. So don't take yourself too seriously. Good.
And I guess as well, you're having to go through the same sort of thinking now with this Series A, and I'm interested, from on my behalf, but also, I'm thinking about our listeners that might be thinking about the same. Is, how do you go about deciding, and from your point of view with the angels, but also now with the Series A, as to what proportion of the business that you're prepared to give away for the amount of money? So essentially, how are you going to put a value on the business?
I think it's challenging. We used a lot of the data reports sort of out there that were aligned to multiples of revenue. Obviously, we were not profit making, so we couldn't use EBITDA or anything as a valuation tool. I think you look at future markets, you look at transactions that have gone on around you, and ultimately, then I think it comes down to a conversation. So what are you getting from that fund source? What type of fund source is it? What runway to exit are they actually giving you in the first place? So when are they expecting their return? How much are they committing to that journey? What are they actually going to do for that journey? Are they arm's length and don't want to, basically they want the monthly reports and then they're done? Or are they actually wanting to utilize their resources and get involved and support you? And I think they all have different benefits. I would say make sure your founder protection rights are strong, because I've heard horror stories. We've not experienced it, but we've heard horror stories. So we made sure they were very strong.
What sort of things specifically?
Just in terms of being removed from the company, I'd heard a couple of horror stories where boards had essentially overridden the founders.
Yeah.
Don't know too much detail into those experiences, other than the fact that I felt not only have I given up my life for this journey, but also it impacts your family. My husband actually works in the business, but we've got a 15-year-old daughter, and it's all encompassing quite often. So you don't want to have put all of this energy and effort, and as well, not just for yourself, that sounds incredibly selfish actually, but also the team that you've brought around you, to suddenly you go on this journey, you've got the culture, everyone's winning, we're going in the right direction, and then all of a sudden you're removed as a sense of direction from the business. That can be disruptive. And then on a selfish level, yes, you can be in a difficult situation. So I think just making sure those key decisions still have to have your authority and your input into those decisions, knowing that it's a two-way street as well. So I very much expect something from our investors now. So, I'm expecting their support, and I'm expecting if I hit a brick wall on something, or I have got an issue that I don't know which way to go, and there's a few different directions of travel, that I can pick up the phone and get, and have that conversation with them. And that's certainly what I'm experiencing with our new fund that is coming on board. They're a family office or a multi-family office. And again, they come with a different, or what seems to be, certainly, I mean, I'm probably not the best, the most wise advisor on funding. There's probably people that have done it so much better and are so much better experienced in this area. But I find that coming from the family office, they seem to have been there, done it, got the T-shirt, in terms of had successful businesses. and any founder knows that if you've got a successful business, you've had some pretty dark moments on that journey in some whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So they've been through that, as opposed to somebody that's necessarily come through, should we say, a financial career through that sort of VC market. There are some more founder VCs that are out there, but I think that founder experience, not just a founder connection, is so valuable.
Absolutely. Good. So you mentioned dark moments. Can you recall a particular dark moment?
Yeah, last year was pretty horrific. We had a fund or an individual angel that was actually going to do the full amount of this funding round.
Right.
We'd signed shareholders agreement, and he turned out to be fraudulent.
Oh, goodness.
And we nearly lost the business. So that was particularly challenging.
Wow.
And it was something that even with the legal checks and everything else, so, has he got the money? Is he who he says he is? It still slipped through the net. And that was challenging. That was a position where we thought, do we walk away from the business, or can we do something differently? Our current investors stepped in and helped.
Right.
And alongside that, suppliers and partners and everybody else along the way has helped us to get to sort of that position where we are now, closing this round, which we're eternally grateful for. That, that probably the biggest lesson I've got there is the power of your ecosystem can actually probably make or break your business.
Yeah.
And having that supportive ecosystem around you. Having an external mentoring network. So out of the Goldman Sachs experience, we're actually partnered with a group. We get put in groups when we went through the course.
Yeah.
So essentially, we've got a peer group of board members that are a sort of advisory, shall we say. And the power of having 5 or 6 of us that are in a room that are all founders of completely different companies. We've got roofing, we've got a food product, we've got recruitment marketing, physio chain. They're so diverse in terms of the backgrounds, but everybody's got a really, really valid input into supporting. So that was really helpful as a sort of release to that situation. I would say that's probably been the darkest, but I think some of those experiences, some of those dark moments can happen for half an hour. You can have an elation 1 minute and then you've lost a client, or somebody's done something against you and said, spread some malicious content or something like that, or said something not nice or whatever, or a transaction hasn't gone your way. Those moments just come, and you suddenly, I think it was one of my investors who said, you've just got to learn to enjoy the ride.
Yes, right.
And I thought, do you know what? You're so true, because actually you cannot construct it in a way. And it doesn't matter if you're super, super, super high growth and everything's going according to plan. There'll be something on supply chain, or there'll be something somewhere that's not going according to plan, because I don't believe any company has it all. Yeah, and has a glorious start to end.
Absolutely, and so expect those challenges, expect those difficulties, and it's just part of life, and part of what being an entrepreneur is around finding ways around or through those obstacles, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's you've hit the nail on the head there. That is how you've got to look at it. Is not woe is me when it happens, but this is a situation. What do I know about it right now? What can I do about it right now? And if I can't do anything about it right now, then c'est la vie, deal with it when you can. I was actually speaking to somebody, just a sort of an exited founder the other day. And just the power of, like she said, if you need to clear your diary to deal with whatever the situation is, just do so. And I think, again, that's too often you can come quite responsive to day-to-day demands on your time, that actually if you're not 100% focused on what you need to achieve as well, it can be a kind of a bit like, it's a bit like being a business waitress or a business waiter, that you can just sort of like, you're serving all of these people and then you go, oh my goodness, I've done nothing for my day at all.
Yeah.
I think sometimes being protective of your own environment is really, really key.
Great. Good stuff. So where do you want to be in 5 years' time? What's the plan?
Well, the ultimate goal, based on what we're hoping, is we're aiming for a 50 million turnover. We're aiming to launch a data and insights platform, which will actually be tracking real-time data insights for consumption patterns of healthy and sustainable snacks across the UK, and potentially international. So pre-COVID, we had 6 international license requests that were purely inbound. And that interest is sort of murmuring around again. Yeah. So I think there is an opportunity, because even if you mentioned right at the beginning, who were our competitors in terms of businesses that actually do what we do? They're few and far between, even on a global perspective, that take that nutrition and the well-being and sustainability. So there is a huge opportunity to take what we're doing, utilize localized brands to support that ecosystem again. Yeah. And also taste as well, because it can vary wildly in terms of localized cultures, and take Healthy Nibbles into different regions.
Brilliant. Well, sounds like you've got fantastic few years ahead of you, and you've had some really good success already behind you. So I've found this conversation absolutely fascinating. Sarah, are you all right for a couple of quick fire sort of questions before we bring it to a close?
Go for it.
Great. So if you were to go back to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh gosh, probably chill out and go with the flow. So I left school without any qualifications and stressed about it horrifically, and felt a bit sort of like my best friend knew she wanted to be a doctor when she was 9. Yeah. So I felt a little bit like, do you not know anything, girl? So yeah, it would just to be, probably in the words of the investor, enjoy the journey. Brilliant. Good. Are there any what books or podcasts or other resources would you have been useful to you that you'd recommend to others? I absolutely love Atomic Habits by James Clear. Yeah, that is one of my go-tos. I'm actually reading Ravenous by Henry Dimbleby at the moment, but you best not get me started on that, because it's so pro in our space that I could be here all night. Right. But I think with the Atomic Habits, for me, that is really, really crucial too. It fits into so many different sort of ways in terms of that 1% change and 1% improvement, because I think sometimes we get so overwhelmed with whether I've got to cycle 20 miles, or I've got to lose 10 stone, or I've got to do whatever it may be, that it becomes so vast that actually that 1% improvement, but you look back at the end of the year, just what you've done is phenomenal. I think a great resource is Full Focus Planner. That is my absolute go-to every day. Okay. And that's kind of like a journal stroke diary that's built into quarters. But you start with, what are your big goals? And it's not just about the business, it's about personal, spiritual, physical, family, all of those different things. You identify your big goals, and then you do quarterly reviews. But you've actually got a daily big 3 as well. Right. So it just keeps you a bit more on track with, there's only so many times when you're writing it that you can say, move forward to the next day without feeling a little bit, hey, I should really do something here. Great. And then there's another set of books, and the name has completely gone to me, but it's like 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. But there's a suite of them. There's I don't know about the suite, but 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. That sounds like Patrick Lencioni. That's it. So I've just gone a little crazy on Amazon and got his whole range of books after reading 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Yeah. And that got me into the coaching idea. Yeah. So, thanks to him. But he's also got things, there's topics around effective meetings and leadership, and the one that I'm sort of partway through that I keep dipping into is around the functions of a CEO. Okay. Or the challenges of a CEO or something like that. But I think he's just a really phenomenal business writer, because I think sometimes you can get too bogged down in what feels like academic business literature.
Yeah.
That you don't actually feel like you're ever getting a break from it, even if you're doing self-help and reading.
Great.
So that's one way of actually softening the blow, shall we say.
Good stuff.
Basically, yeah, I found them very, very helpful.
Great. Hey, what sort of apps or bits of software have you found particularly useful?
Oh, the biggest for me has to be health related, and it's Aura Ring, and it tracks your sleep and also it links into, so I've got Apple Health as well. So it links into whatever fitness tracker you've got, if you've got one. But you can set it on different goals. So I was actually quite badly affected by a COVID vaccine. So I set it on recovery. So it tracks you in light of recovery. If you're going through a period of stress, it kind of tracks you in that sense. Or if you're trying to achieve some brilliant fitness goal, then it will sort of support you in that. You can see how well you're sleeping, the restfulness that you're getting, looks at anxiety levels, all sorts of things. I find that absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I would say that's kind of my main go-to actually, is just making sure that aligns with the full focus side of things.
Yeah, good. And who's had the most influence on you as a business leader? Do you think, would that be James Clear, or who do you think would?
Yeah, it would be one of those two actually. Yeah. Patrick Lencioni or James Clear, I would say. But also people I would say just probably quite a wide range of people. So like the women who've developed Chantecaille makeup, or the family that have developed Chantecaille makeup, that really have a very sort of beautiful product that also gives back into the environment, which is really, I think for me, is that's what really impacts it, or drives where I get the information from, and drives the people that I support. There's a company called Davines Hair Care, where they're a B Corp, and for an organization so large, so complex, global, then attaining the B Corp, you kind of see the challenges in that. But then I think if you just look at all the young founders as well, the sort of challenger brands in the food space, the younger businesses, I think they also impact me, just in terms of if you take those snippets of lessons that everybody's learned, you can see if they apply to you, because I think that is ultimately, otherwise you just get overkill of information from everywhere. But I think ultimately gut is everything, and go with your vision. And people will sort of dip in and out of that in terms of how they influence you. Excellent.
Good. And the last one on these, and what's your most successful way of finding new customers? What works for you?
LinkedIn and speaking engagements, networking, telling the story, because it's a personal story, but it's impactful. But I do think LinkedIn is really, really a really powerful tool done well, as long as you're not one of these nightmare people that sort of connect and drop you a sales pitch. But no, I think developing relationships, ultimately it's relationship driven. That's what we shoot for all the time. Super.
Brilliant. Well, it's been absolutely fascinating talking with you. Lots of really good insights and advice, Sara. Thank you very much for sharing all of those. I could talk to you for another hour at least, I'm sure, but probably ought to bring it to a close. So how can people get hold of you or find out more about Healthy Nibbles if they'd like to?
So I think I'm an open book in terms of if people want to get in touch for advice or whatever it may be. So my email, and it's dead easy. So it's just Sara, which is without the H, at healthynibbles.co.uk. Yeah. Our website, just for general information on what we do. And again, I love to sort of, as I say, LinkedIn, and love to connect. But an open book. So if anyone wants to just reach out, that's fine.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you very much indeed, Sara.
No worries.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.